verse number 50. Vayidab Hashem al Moshe ba'avois Moav al Yarden Yerecho leimor. Daber b'nei Yisrael amata elehem ki atem oivrim es hayarden el eretz Canaan. What's going to happen now is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to talk about the land of Israel. He's going to talk about the borders of the land of Israel. We're talking about the biblical borders over here. So the first thing, of course, is to talk about going into the land of Israel. V'hirashtem es kol yoshvei ha'aretz mipneichem v'ibadatem es kol maski oisom v'es kol tzalmei Massei choisom ta'abedu v'es kol bamoisom tashmidu. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, when you go into the land of Israel, one of the things that you've got to do is that you've got to cleanse the land of Israel from any kind of idol worship. Any kind of things that were used for idol worship. So over here it talks about molten images and high places and stones, whatever it is. Now, it's something very fundamental over here. The land of Israel is a land which is intrinsically holy, which means the land of Israel can't stomach having things that are designed for idol worship. You know, under normal circumstances, there's no mitzvah, for example, when you're living outside of the land of Israel, to cleanse the area that you live in of idol worship, idol worshipping, symbols and bits and pieces, whatever they bow down to. You don't have to do that, right? Person can live opposite, a very frum, super deluxe frum fellow can live opposite a place of idol worship, and it's fine. The shul that I daven in when I'm in London, the shul that I daven in is actually opposite a idol worshipping. I can't remember what it's called. One of these Asian temples. Swami, maybe, something like that. Whatever, in Golders Green. There's no mitzvah to go and to cleanse the area of the idol worshipping that's over there. But in the land of Israel, there is. Like, why is that? Because the land of Israel is intrinsically holy, and it's not good that there be idol worshipping things over here. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying that you've got to cleanse the land. It's got to be cleaned out. And once you've taken over the land, you're going to dwell in the land. So the land belongs to the Jewish people. Right? So here it is. If anybody has any doubts about whether we have a claim over to the land of Israel or we don't have a claim to the land of Israel, over here it's spelled out very clearly. It's spelled out in Sefer Bereshit. It's spelled out clearly as well that HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises to Abraham that this is our land and it's going to be given over as an inheritance to his descendants to come after him. V'hisnachaltem es ha'aretz b'goyr al mishpachoiseichem l'rav tabu es nachlasoi v'lemat tamid es nachlasoi el asher yetze lo yishama agor lo yiyeh. And how is the land going to be apportioned? So we spoke about this in the past a little bit. The land is going to be given out according to the tribes. Each tribe is going to get a block of land, with the exception of 2 tribes. We'll talk about it in a minute. Each land is going to get a block of land. And how is that block going to be given to them? Through some kind of a lottery. That's a lottery that took place in such a way that there was both the name of the tribe was on one side, and the block of land that it was going to get was on the other side, and there would be 2 lots that were drawn out at the same time, and they would be matched together. The reason for that was very simple. If you do something through a lottery, then nobody can claim afterwards that another tribe was given precedence because they happened to be closer to whoever was deciding who's going to be where. Which means that even though the lots were given out with divine, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took care of who was going to get what, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew perfectly well that at some point somebody's going to get up and going to say, hold on a second, it's not fair. They've got better land than we've got, therefore it must be that they had an in with whoever was taking care of the lottery over here. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no, it's going to be done in a way where nobody can come to complain afterwards. And you're going to inherit according to your father, which means like this. Your Jewish status goes according to your mother. Right? If your mother is Jewish, then you're Jewish. Truth of the matter is that when it comes to Jewish status, it really makes no difference whether your father is Jewish, he's not Jewish. It's not going to make any difference at all. What is going to define a person's Jewishness is their mother. However, your tribal affiliation is being defined by your father, not by your mother. Why is that? Because your tribal affiliation is something which is pretty external. right? The input of the father into bringing a child into the world is relatively external. The mother, it's all internal. The baby grows within inside of the mother for the 9 months of pregnancy. After that, the formative years of education, the mother is the one that's feeding the child. The mother is the one that's spending most of the time together with the child when the child is a baby. On top of that, says the Gemara something very fascinating. You are your children's father by dint of what's called a chazaka. What is a chazaka? Chazaka is something which establishes a fact, even though there may be no absolute proof for what it is that you're establishing. Which means that a father, the mother of the child is pretty easily identified as the mother because she's the one that was pregnant and she's the one that's carrying the child and giving birth to the child. The father, on the other hand, says the Gemara, your fatherhood is being established by the idea that most relationships, the wife is faithful to her husband, and you can assume that the father of the child is her husband. Until the advent of DNA, there was no real way of being able to work out who was the father and who wasn't the father. It was just done. It was just an established fact. That's all it was. So when it comes to something which is more external, which is belonging to your tribe, so we go according to the father. Right? So if your father was a Kohen, you'll be a Kohen. If your father came from the tribe of Yehuda, you'll come from the tribe of Yehuda. If your father came from the tribe of Binyamin, you would come from Binyamin. But when it comes to whether you're Jewish or not, that's an internal dimension, something which is very personal. It's something which is acutely unique only to you. And that's going to be defined by the mother for two reasons. First of all, because your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is supposed to be something which is acutely personal and something which is internal. But on top of that is also the idea that the mother, we can establish the fact that the mother is the mother of the child. And the father, we're just working on an assumption that it's a chazaka. That's why we're going like this. However, there were two tribes that weren't given land. Actually, that's not strictly true. There were two tribes that weren't given one block of land. One tribe was the tribe of Levi, which we've spoken about, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later on, because they were spread out in order to be the spiritual role models of the Jewish people. There had to be Levites in every single block of land that there was. The other tribe that didn't receive a single block of land was the tribe of Shimon. The tribe of Shimon were given bits and pieces of land. They didn't have, what's it called, a contiguous? Is that how you say it? Contiguous. Yeah, they didn't have a contiguous piece of land. They weren't given one piece of land. Why is that? So the Gemara suggests the basic reason is because the tribe of Shimon, they were the tribe that were given, they were the expert educators. They would teach the young children. And if they were going to teach the young children, so they had to be spread around all over the place, that people would be able to bring their kids to them and they'd be able to teach them. And so there were little bits and pieces of blocks of land that belonged to Shimon spread out all over the land of Israel. However, there's something a little bit deeper over here as well. Moshe Rabbeinu is aware of the fact that the tribe of Shimon is a very complex tribe. The tribe of Shimon, unfortunately, has proved on more than one occasion that their loyalty lies first and foremost with their own tribe, and then only afterwards with the greater Jewish people. The last time we came across that, of course, was by Pinchas. Right? When Pinchas went and he killed the head of the tribe of Shimon, instead of the tribe of Shimon coming out and saying, you know what, Pinchas was right and Zimri was wrong, and we should be happy that he did what he did, in the end, what did the tribe of Shimon do? They gathered around their dead leader and they tried to foment a rebellion, and 24,000 people died because of what they did. So Moshe Rabbeinu was aware of the fact that the tribe of Shimon is not such an easy tribe to deal with. What's his concern? His concern is that if the tribe of Shimon have an entire block of land that belongs only to them, then what will happen at some point? They'll decide that their block of land is more important than the greater land of Israel, and they'll secede. They'll decide that they don't want to belong to the land of Israel, and they'll establish their own independent country. Hold on a second. Their own independent country within the land of Israel. It's something that you see going along. It's happening. It's interesting. It's happening all over the place now. Right? It's happening in parts of the Russian, what used to be the Russian Empire, little countries that now want to be independent, and then people within each country that want to be independent inside of their own independent countries. You've got it happening in parts of Europe, in England, for example. Scotland wants parts of Scotland, any part of the Scottish people want to secede from the United Kingdom in order for them to be able to go bankrupt by themselves. They don't want to wait for the English to do it. They want to do it in their own way. You've got places here in the Middle East. You've got the Kurds wanting independence, and you've got these people wanting independence, and those people wanting independence. And that's exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu was scared of. That if the tribe of Shimon had one contiguous piece of land, what would happen in the end was that they would decide that they were going to be their own independent country. What did Moshe do? He gave them bits and pieces of land. So they've got their own places to settle in, but they're split up amongst the other parts, amongst the other tribes, in order to make sure that they don't really have that opportunity to decide that they want to establish their own kingdom. Yeah.
I was just wondering if that was almost like a punishment or something, because if they're separated like that, doesn't that imply kind of like a weakness?
Yes.
That no one...
Yes, absolutely. Right, absolutely.
So was that the intention?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, Moshe's intention was to make sure that the tribe of Shimon don't have the opportunity to misuse their unity, right? Is that an indication of weakness? Yeah, absolutely. Moshe, it's a little bit of damage control over here. Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to make sure that it's not going to happen again. They've suffered a few times from the tribe of Shimon. Interestingly enough, the original brothers Shimon and Levi, they also had the same kind of an issue when they went to war. Again, after their sister Dinah was raped, they went to war against the city of Shechem by themselves without making any kind of an investigation with the other brothers whether it was a good idea. It wasn't a good idea. They didn't go to their father to try to get his advice either. Yaakov was very upset with them. Levi learns a lesson from there, and Shimon doesn't learn the lesson. And in the end, when it comes, for example, to the sin of the golden calf, Levi are the ones that gather around and they do exactly what God wants them to do, and they don't take their own feelings into account. By Pinchas, we see that Shimon does the opposite, which means that even though they started off in the same kind of a level, they started off with the same kind of a problem, nevertheless, Levi rectified the problem. Shimon never rectified the problem, and that's why Moshe Rabbeinu wants to make sure that they're spread around all over the place. What's going to happen? How is the land going to be apportioned? So the land's going to be apportioned according to who's got a lot, who's got a little. It's not 100% clear over here what that means. Whether it means that each tribe will get an equal amount, and then the more families there are means that each family will get a smaller portion, or whether it means that the apportionment of the land of Israel is going to take place according to how big your tribe is. Bigger the tribe, the more land. The smaller the tribe, the less land. It's not 100% clear over here from the words. It's not 100% clear exactly what's being referred to over here. So says the Pasuk, and if you don't drive out the people, right? What have we got? In the land of Israel, there are 7 nations that need to be expelled in order for us to be able to go in and live over there. And if we don't do that, what will happen? There'll be, here in the translation, it says there'll be pins in your eyes and thorns in your sides. They're going to make your lives very difficult over here. Something that we've seen over and over again. Right? That if we don't do what God tells us to do, at the end of the day, it's just going to rebound, and we're going to end up suffering and really we'll be suffering. It will be our own fault. God is saying we have to go into the land of Israel, and one of the things that we have to do over there is that we have to remove all the nations that are there. What does that mean to remove the nations? So there were various opportunities that were offered to the nations of the world, to the nations of the land of Israel. As the Jewish people were on the border waiting to go into the land of Israel, they sent in messengers to all of the different nations telling them that they had various options. The first option was that they should leave. Right? The Jewish army is saying, we don't want to fight with you. We really don't. But we're coming in, which means that if you want to leave, gesundheit, feel free to leave, and that's probably the best thing to do. The second option is for you to accept upon yourselves our sovereignty over the land of Israel, and then you can live over here according to the 7 Noahide laws, and that's fine as well. And the third option is, if you don't want to do Numbers 1 or number 2, is that we're coming in and we're going to go to war against you. And you should know that we've got God on our side, and we're here because God has brought us over here, and it's going to be, that will be your mistake. Which means that we see over here, it's interesting, I guess. Unfortunately, it's something which is very applicable to today as well, that from the beginning of the conquest of the land of Israel, the Jewish army has always been as moral as is possible under the laws of warfare. It's difficult to be in war, it's difficult to be in battle, and yet the Torah is giving a whole series of different laws that need to be kept in order to be able to fight in the way that God wants us to fight, and not to fight in the way that everybody else wants us to fight. There was a city in Germany called Dresden that the Allies during the Second World War, they bombed the city to smithereens. I don't know how many thousands upon thousands of people were killed in the bombardment, and the city was almost entirely destroyed. At the time, during the Second World War, nobody really cared two hoots, right? It was deemed important enough to do this, and they destroyed the whole city. Afterwards, of course, people started saying maybe it shouldn't have been done. If my memory serves me correct, there was somebody called Flight Lieutenant Harris. Is that right? Bomber Harris, they called him, right? Flight Lieutenant Harris, who was the head of the bombing crews that went through over there. In some places, he was hailed as a hero. In some places, he was hailed as a war criminal. What's right and what's wrong in war? I don't know. I really don't know what to tell. I don't. It's something which is very, very difficult to define. I've used this as an example in the past, and please don't misunderstand me, which normally means when I say that, that's exactly what you'll do. But in the Second World War, the Asian part of the Second World War came to an end with a dropping of 2 atom bombs, one on Hiroshima, one on Nagasaki. The truth is, whether the second one needed to be dropped is a moot point. The overwhelming reason why they decided to drop the bomb was because they made all kinds of investigations, they made all kinds of research, and if they had to do a landing, if they had to send the army in, they made a calculation that they would lose anything between 400 and 800,000 American and Allied soldiers would be killed in a regular landing in order to overrun the Japanese army. So they dropped an atom bomb. I don't know in the end how many, if anybody knows how many people died from the 2 bombs that were dropped, but I think it was over 100,000.
180,000 in Hiroshima.
Oh, just in one place, 180,000. Okay, look at that, right? And the other one, Nagasaki?
Well, that was an airburst, and only about 60,000 people were killed there.
Okay, but we're talking about, a quarter of a million people died, right? In order to bring the war to an end. Is that morally acceptable? Is it not morally acceptable? I hope. I mean, I'm not making any judgment calls over it. I just hope that everyone realizes how complicated it is to come up with a definitive answer over here. Was it right? I don't know. Was it wrong? I also don't know. It's not an easy thing to judge, right? When you're going into war, the Torah is trying to teach us that we have to be as moral as we can be under the circumstances, right? You see what's going on now in Gaza. There've been casualties, a lot of casualties on the other side. There haven't been too many casualties on our side, Baruch Hashem, but you should know that the casualties that there have been on our side is coming from the fact that the army is very, very cautious about what it can and what it cannot do, because it's trying not to kill civilians. It's doing its best. Speak to soldiers outside of the Israeli army, and they'll tell you that that's not the way to go about warfare. Right? You shoot first and you ask questions later. Torah is telling us not like that. Torah is telling us when you go into the land of Israel, it's interesting, there are all kinds of laws. For example, when you go and you lay a siege down, so one of the things that you're supposed to do according to the Torah when you lay a siege is to leave one side open, to let the people escape. That there is no overwhelming reason within side of Torah to destroy a nation by killing everybody simply because that's what people do. In the olden days, that was pretty much when you laid a siege. I mean, if the siege was successful, then not too many people came out of there alive. Even up to and including the First World War, the idea of taking hostages wasn't, prisoners of war. It wasn't something which was, it wasn't engraved into what the Geneva Convention was established when? 1917, I think. No, yeah.
Right after the First World War.
Right after, right? So, whatever, 1917, 1918, whenever it was.
The war ended in 1918. The peace was made after that, so it must have been in 1919.
Okay, whenever it was, but immediately afterwards, up until the end, the idea of taking prisoners of war, the obligation of taking prisoners rather than killing them, was something which was not taken too seriously by too many people. The Maharami Rottenberg, there's a fascinating story. The Maharami Rottenberg, who one of the greatest Torah scholars, one of the greatest Jewish leaders, going back hundreds of years, was arrested by the authorities, and he was thrown into jail. And they asked an enormous ransom in order to be able to have him released. And the Maharami Rottenberg told the Jewish community he forbade them from paying the ransom, because he says that if you pay the ransom for me, then the next time they'll take somebody else, they'll ask for even more. Right? And Ein Adavar Sof, there's no end to this. There really isn't. And he forbade the Jewish community from paying the ransom, and he actually died in prison. Wouldn't allow him go out.
That should have been applied to the idea of kidnapping people in exchange for releasing prisoners. That's the same thing.
I can still remember when I was a kid, right? When people were kidnapped over here, soldiers were kidnapped over here, the release was normally 1 for 1. Sometimes it was 1 for 2. It didn't happen very often, but that was the the bartering system was that if you've got 1, then you can release 1. At some point, 1 became whatever it was, 20, and then it became 100, and now we're talking about thousands each time, releasing over 1,000. It's the Maharami Rottenberg. It's interesting. It's based on a Gemara. It's not something that he just brought out by himself. The Maharami Rottenberg said the Gemara says that you have to put certain caps on things, because otherwise it's going to destroy the communities. And that's one of the things when people are kidnapped, that you cannot give too much, because each time you do, they'll just up the ante. That's all it is.
Well, I thought that the amount you were able to pay was what they could be purchased for if they were sold as a slave.
So again, under normal circumstances, it depends a little bit on who you're talking about. If you're talking about somebody the stature of the Maharami Rottenbergs, of course there are definitely halachic openings to give much more than that. But the Maharami Rottenberg himself said that if you do that, then you're just asking for trouble, right? Because it's not as if these people, now that they've got this, then they'll be happy with that and they'll leave the Jewish people alone. No, they'll just find somebody else to go and kidnap, and they'll do it all over again. Here, it says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, verse number 56. V'haya ka'asher dimisi la'asos lehem eseh lachem. This is really disturbing. Yeah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that if you don't do what I'm telling you to do, then I'll do it to you instead. Right? What's he saying? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that you've got to drive the non-Jewish nations out of the land of Israel, because the land of Israel belongs to us, and this is where we need to be in order for us to be able to reach our potential and for the land of Israel to reach its potential. Right? It's a symbiotic relationship between the two. If the Jewish people don't have the temple, then we cannot reach our spiritual potential. And if the land of Israel doesn't have the Jewish people living on it, then it can't reach its potential either. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you don't do what I'm telling you to do, which is drive out the non-Jewish nations of the world, then I'll drive you out of here. So the Gemara is saying like this, not in this context over here, but this is really what it is. You're talking about tough, right? And everybody knows this, but nobody really likes to acknowledge it. But sometimes, you have to be cruel in order to be kind. We all know that. We would prefer that it wasn't so, that's all. So anyone who, children, right? You bring up your children and you have to give your children to have a shot by the doctor, right? So of course it hurts. We all know that it hurts, and we don't want our children to have to go through that pain. But if they don't go through that pain, they'll go through pain which is far worse later on, right? We all understand in theory the concept of having to be cruel to be kind. Over here, that's exactly what we're being taught over here. We're being taught, don't try to second guess God. God wants you in the land of Israel. If you want to be in the land of Israel and other nations that are living in the land of Israel, you got to get them out of here. That's what it comes down to. And says, God, if you don't want to listen to what I'm telling you, then I'll do to you what you were supposed to do to them. Is it nice? No, it's not nice. It's not nice to hear. Which means that we need to understand, at the end of the day, we need to understand that we have to do the will of God. That's what we're here for. We know the seven nations that are in the land of Israel, the first nation that's in the land of Israel is Amalek.
Because it says to drive him out.
Drive him out. Right. So here, there's a very interesting thing over here. You should know something which is absolutely fascinating. And I think it is something which is both exhilarating and it is both disturbing as well. Who is an Amalekite? How do we define Amalekitism? Is that a genealogical thing? Your father was an Amaleki, so you are an Amaleki? Or is it something else altogether? So there's a very famous proof that's brought. The Rambam, the Rambam is the ultimate rationalist. He's absolutely logical, the Rambam. And if you read through his work of the Yad HaChazakah, the Mishnah Torah, which is a halachic work, it's absolutely logical, it's absolutely straight. Over there in Hilchos Melachim, the Rambam says that there is a mitzvah, Massei, there's a positive mitzvah to drive out the nations in the land of Israel, that they shouldn't be here anymore. And then the Rambam writes that since the time of Sancheriv, so we're going back about 2,400 years, from the time of Sancheriv, which is when the Jewish people were dispersed, since then we don't know who's who, because one of the things that Sancheriv did was that he took all the nations of the world and he mixed them all around. He was very clever. And he understood that in order to build his own empire, the first thing you've got to do is destroy the national identity of each country that you're overrunning. How do you do that? The easiest way to destroy national identity is to take the people out from that country and put them into a different country instead. Which means that the people of this, the people of this nation are no longer that's no longer the original people. Says the Rambam, it's impossible to identify who the seven nations of the land of Israel are, so therefore there's no mitzvah to drive them out because we don't know who they are. In the very next mitzvah, says the Rambam, that it's a mitzvah Massei to destroy Amalek. Timche zeicha Amalek mitachas hamayim, to get rid of Amalek entirely. Explains Rav Chaim Brisker like this. The most incredible idea. That Amalek is it's got nothing to do with your genealogy. Amalek is an ideology. And anybody can belong to Amalek, and an Amaleki does not have to be a part of that ideology. It's a very interesting proof. Right? To me, I think this is pretty fundamental. You know that there are different laws about who can convert, who can't convert. If you come from Egypt, you have to wait 3 generations. If you come from a different place, you have to wait for 10 generations in order to convert. There are no restrictions whatsoever for an Amalekite to convert. How can that be? If you come from Amalekite genealogy, you would imagine that Amalekites are out, right? They'll never be included. It's impossible for them. Right? But the answer is what? It's got nothing to do with who your parents are. It's to do with what your ideology is. Which means, Hitler, Yamach Shmoy V'Zichroi, was Hitler a part of the Amalekite nation? Of course he was. Genealogically, I doubt it very much. I really do. But ideologically, he belonged to Amalek just as much as the original Amalek did, and just as much as Haman did. And all the other people in history that have risen up to try to destroy the Jewish people. Are they Amalekis? Yeah, for sure.
Some kind of an evil spirit that hovers around the world, around time, and it sits in different places.
You want to be truly disturbed? Mm-hmm. Right now, you're just partially disturbed, right? You want to be truly disturbed. The power of Amalek, says the Chassam Sofer, the power of Amalek comes from the Jewish people, which means that there is an equal and opposite force here in this world. The Jewish people are supposed to be in all going. We're supposed to bring light into the world, spiritual light. If we don't do what we're supposed to do, we give strength to the other side, to the opposite end of the spectrum. The more strength there is, the more that's coming from, ultimately, from us. Here, the original Amalek, they fight against the Jewish people when? Whenever we do what we're not supposed to do, Amalek raises itself up. Right? The Jewish people go to the banquet that was put up by Achashverosh, even though Mordechai told them not to go, all of a sudden, Haman appears on the horizon. Right? Over and over again in Jewish history, we don't do what we're supposed to do. Right? The Chassam Sofer is saying that Amalek is a physical manifestation of our relationship with God. Why does the world look the way that it looks? If we really wanted to tackle the problem, in Europe, this is not a PR problem. And over here in Israel, this is not a Hezbollah problem. It's not a Hamas problem. It's not a Syria and Iraq and Iran problem. It's an internal problem. You hear? So I want to tell you something that I heard. It's something which I found to be I find it to be extremely thought-provoking. I find it to be extremely insightful. And I find it also in a certain way to be extremely beautiful as well. You know, the whole of the Jewish world was davening for those 3 boys that were kidnapped. Those 3 boys were killed a few moments after they were kidnapped. They weren't alive anymore. And yet, for over 2 weeks, almost 3 weeks, the whole Jewish world, we didn't know. And we're davening, and the most incredible sense of unity that existed inside of the Jewish nation at the time, it was something unbelievable. So I heard an idea, something absolutely fascinating. Why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu let the Jewish people pour out their hearts and unite together over something which was lost from the beginning? It wasn't there. Those boys were dead already. He said that unity is what's keeping us safe right now. Those weeks of unity that existed inside of the Jewish people, and those weeks where who knows how many psalms were recited in order for the good, not just of those Jewish boys, but for all of us, that's what's keeping us safe right now. Can anybody explain how it is? You know, Baruch Hashem, we have something called Kippat Barzel, the Iron Dome, which is doing a fantastic job. But do you know how many missiles have fallen? Falling here in Israel. The ones that are getting through, or the ones that they don't set off the Iron Dome because they're going off into places where there's no one there, and hardly any damage is done. And people, it's unbelievable what's going on. The power of that unity is keeping us safe. It's the most incredible idea, it really is. Amalek is not something which exists in a vacuum. The power of Amalek is something which is, I'm hesitant, I'm much hesitant to use these words, but I'm going to use them anyway. The power of Amalek is something which is, we feed it. What's the pshat? The pshat is like this, that we have to do what God wants us to do. If we do what God wants us to do, the world will look very, very different from the way that it looks right now. That's what it means to be an all going. We are a light unto the nations. So we'll end with a remark. I've used this on many, many occasions, but it's something which is really, really incredibly sharp and incredibly strong. That Rav Chaim Volozhiner used to say that if the Jewish people won't do Kiddush, then the non-Jews will do Havdalah. Mm-hmm. Which means that we have to sanctify the world. if we don't do it, the non-Jewish nations of the world, they don't want anything to do with us anyway. The separation will be there come what way. We can make Kiddush and we can sanctify ourselves and be separate because of that. Or they'll make the Havdalah. They'll make the separation. And Havdalah is an involuntary thing. When we make Kiddush on Friday night, we want it to be Shabbos. We want to bring in that sanctity into our lives, and we want to join together with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. On Massei Shabbos, when we make Havdalah, we're not doing it because we want to. We're doing it because we have to. The week's beginning, there's nothing we can do about it. Havdalah is involuntary. Either we make Kiddush or they'll make Havdalah. So when you hear it like that, I don't know, what are the... Is it so complicated to work out what the right way to do this is? No, Rabbi say that means we're going to stop over here in Mitzvah Hashem. That means that every single one of you has to be a walking, talking Kiddush Hashem, right? Pouring light into the world.